Tonight, we will learn how to quiet the busy mind and rest in a peace that cannot be disturbed by anything outside of you. These are not new ideas. They come from teachings that have been passed down for thousands of years, from Zen masters and Buddhist monks who spent their entire lives studying the nature of the mind. What they discovered still works today because the mind has not changed, and neither has the peace that waits beneath it. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. During our time together, we will understand how we lose ourselves in narrow ideas of who we are and how we might find our way back to something more whole, more peaceful, more true. There is nothing complicated here, nothing you need to achieve or figure out, just an invitation to settle, to listen, and to let go. Peace is not something we need to create or earn. It is already here. We have simply forgotten, and forgetting, as it turns out, is the only problem we have ever had. So let the body settle. Take a slow, deep breath, and let's begin our journey together. There is something that happens to us in moments of deep stillness. Perhaps you have felt it yourself. A quieting of the inner chatter, a softening of the boundaries between yourself and the world around you, a sense of ease that seems to arise from nowhere and everywhere at once. In those moments, something releases. The grip of worry loosens. The constant planning and reviewing that fills our ordinary mind grows quiet. And in that quiet, we touch something that feels like coming home. The Buddha spoke of this. He described a peace that does not depend on circumstances, a happiness that is not borrowed from pleasant events, but arises from within. He called it the end of suffering, and he taught that this peace is not something we need to create or achieve. It is something we need only to remember. But here is the question that brings us to the heart of tonight's teaching. Why do these moments of peace slip away? Why do we taste freedom, only to find ourselves, hours or days later, caught once again in the familiar tangles of our minds? This is not a small question. It is perhaps the most important question on the spiritual path. Let us explore a story together. Once, a sincere practitioner traveled to a distant land to spend several months in a monastery. It was a place of great simplicity. The days were structured around meditation, walking slowly through the grounds, eating simple meals in silence. There were no phones, no news, no demands from the outside world. Just the quiet rhythm of practice, day after day. At first, as often happens, the practitioner's mind was restless. Old worries surfaced. Memories arose unbidden. The body ached from sitting. But slowly, gradually, something began to shift. The inner noise grew softer. The spaces between thoughts grew wider. By the third month, something remarkable was happening. There were long stretches of time when the practitioner noticed a quality of stillness that had no center. There was awareness, yes. There was perception. But there was no one gripping the experience, no one trying to hold on to it or push it away. There was just openness, presence, a kind of tender aliveness that needed nothing to be different than it was. And in this openness, there was no suffering. One evening, the practitioner sat with an elder teacher in the garden as the sun was setting. "Something is different," the practitioner said quietly. "There is stillness, but no one holding it. Peace, but no one claiming it. Is this what the teachings point to?" The teacher smiled gently. "What do you think?" "I do not know. It feels like freedom, but I am afraid to call it that. That is wise, the teacher said. Do not name it. Do not grasp it. Simply let it be what it is. Then the time at the monastery came to an end. The practitioner traveled home, returning to family, to the familiar rooms and routines of ordinary life. Within days, it had vanished. A small disagreement arose with a loved one over something insignificant. I thought you were going to take care of that, the loved one said, an edge in their voice. I never said that. You always assume I will handle everything. That is not true. You never listen. And suddenly, the practitioner was someone again. Someone who felt slighted. Someone who needed to defend their position. Someone who was right and someone else who was wrong. The vast openness had contracted into a tight, familiar knot. This is not a story of failure. This is a story of how things work. The ancient teachers understood this well. They spoke of enlightenment not as a single event, but as a deepening process. They recognized that we can taste freedom many times before it becomes stable. We can touch the truth of our being only to have it obscured again by the habits of a lifetime. There is a Zen saying, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The external circumstances may look the same, but something has shifted in how we meet them. And this shift does not usually happen all at once. It ripens slowly, like fruit on a tree. So we should not be discouraged when our peaceful moments dissolve in the heat of ordinary life. Instead, we can become curious. We can ask, what is it that allows that openness to flower? And what is it that causes it to close down again? The monastery offered something precious to that practitioner. It offered an environment where the usual triggers were absent. There was no one to argue with, no deadlines, no news to disturb the heart, no old patterns of relationship playing out their familiar dramas. In such an environment, the mind can settle naturally, like a jar of muddy water that is finally allowed to sit undisturbed. The sediment sinks to the bottom and the water becomes clear. But most of us do not live in monasteries. We live in families and workplaces, in cities and towns filled with noise and demand. We live among people who sometimes frustrate us and situations that provoke us. And this is where the real practice takes place. The Buddha did not remain in solitude after his awakening. He walked back into the world. He taught for many years among all kinds of people, in all kinds of circumstances. His peace was not dependent on external quiet. It had been tested and tempered in the marketplace of life. This is the invitation for each of us. Not to escape life, but to find freedom within it. Not to avoid the waves, but to discover the stillness at the depth of the ocean that remains undisturbed, no matter what moves on the surface. Many people report a particular kind of experience after a period of meditation or retreat. Perhaps you have felt this yourself. There is a sitting, and it is deeper than usual. The breath settles. The mind grows quiet. And for a time, there is a quality of peace that feels effortless. The heart is open. There is nothing to defend, nothing to prove. Just this breath, just this moment, just this gentle awareness. And then the session ends. We rise from the cushion, begin to move through our day. And before long, something happens. A conversation, a memory, a piece of news, and the peace evaporates like morning mist. This is such a common experience that teachers have been addressing it for thousands of years. The Buddha's early disciples asked about it. Zen students have asked about it. Practitioners in every tradition have wondered, why can I not hold on to this? The answer lies in understanding what allows the peace to arise in the first place. In those deep moments of stillness, something has temporarily released. The constant sense of being someone, the feeling of a separate self at the center of experience, has softened. There is still awareness. There is still perception. But the tight grip of me and mine has loosened. This is the key. The peace we touch in deep stillness is not caused by pleasant circumstances. It is revealed when the contractions of self-concern temporarily relax. And those contractions return, as they do for most of us, the moment our habitual patterns are triggered. Someone says something that feels threatening. A worry about the future arises. An old wound is touched. And immediately, the sense of a separate self solidifies again. Here I am. This is happening to me. I need to protect myself. The openness closes. The peace is forgotten. The Buddha had a simple and profound teaching about this. He said that our suffering arises from a fundamental misunderstanding about who we are. We take ourselves to be limited, separate beings, and we spend our lives defending and promoting this limited self. We grasp at what we think will make it happy. We push away what we think will threaten it. And in this constant grasping and pushing, we create the very suffering we are trying to escape. But who is this self we are defending? When we look closely, we find something surprising. We find that this solid sense of self is not as solid as it seems. It is more like a process than a thing. A constant activity of constructing and maintaining an identity through thoughts, feelings, memories, and stories. And when that activity pauses, even for a moment, we taste freedom. This is what happened to the practitioner in the monastery. The usual activities of self-construction were not being triggered. There was space for the process to settle. And in that settling, the natural peace that is always present could finally be felt. Let us take this teaching a little deeper. The Zen master Huang Po once said, "The foolish reject what they see, not what they think. The wise reject what they think, not what they see." What does this mean? Most of us are so caught up in our thoughts about experience that we miss the experience itself. We see a sunset, but immediately our mind is commenting on it, comparing it to other sunsets, planning to take a photograph, wondering what we should have for dinner. The direct experience of the sunset, the simple seeing of colors and light, is obscured by all this mental activity. The same is true of our inner experience. We have a feeling of sadness, and immediately the mind begins its commentary. Why am I feeling this? I should not feel this way. What is wrong with me? The direct experience of sadness, the simple texture of it in the body, is lost in the storm of thought. When we practice presence, we are learning to receive experience directly, without all the added layers of interpretation. We are learning to see what we see, feel what we feel, without the constant filter of thought. And when we do this, something remarkable happens. We discover that the simple fact of being aware is already peaceful. Before we add anything to it, before we construct stories about what is happening, there is just this open, clear awareness. And it is inherently at ease. This is what the Tibetan teaching is pointing to when it speaks of the essence of mind. It is not referring to the content of the mind, the thoughts and feelings and memories that pass through. It is pointing to the awareness itself, the knowing quality that is present in all experience. That awareness is our true nature, and it is always at peace. But if our true nature is always at peace, why do we suffer? This brings us to the central insight of tonight's teaching. We suffer because we forget. We become so absorbed in the content of experience, so identified with the thoughts and feelings and stories that move through awareness, that we lose touch with the awareness itself. We become like someone watching a movie who has forgotten they are sitting in a theater. The movie seems to be the whole of reality. This forgetting is not a one-time event. It happens again and again, moment by moment, throughout our lives. A thought arises, and we become the thinker. An emotion surfaces, and we become the one who is angry or afraid or sad. A story begins to spin, and we become the protagonist in that story. Each time this happens, we leave home. We step out of the vast, peaceful awareness that is our true nature, and we squeeze ourselves into a narrow identity. And then, eventually, something reminds us. Perhaps a moment of unexpected beauty. Perhaps the exhaustion of our own mental struggling. Perhaps the words of a wise teaching or the bell that ends a meditation session. And we remember, oh yes, I was lost in thought. I had forgotten. That moment of remembering is precious. It is the beginning of the path back home. There is a story told of an ancient teacher who was asked by a student, "What is the essence of your teaching?" The student had traveled far to ask this question. He knelt before the teacher with great earnestness. "Master, I have studied many texts. I have practiced many methods, but I feel no closer to the truth. Please, tell me simply, what is the essence of your teaching?" The teacher looked at him with kind eyes and replied with one word, "Attention." The student waited for more. Surely there must be an explanation, a method, a path to follow. But the teacher remained silent. "Forgive me, Master," the student said. "I do not understand. Please, explain further." The teacher nodded slowly. "Attention. Attention. Attention." The student felt frustration rising in his chest. But what does attention mean? How do I practice it? What should I attend to? The teacher smiled. "You are attending right now. To your frustration, to your wanting, to your thoughts about what should be happening. This is attention. But it is attention caught in the net of self. When attention is free, it simply rests in what is. No grasping, no pushing away. Just this. And that is enough." The student asked. "That is everything," the teacher replied. This simple exchange points to something profound. The whole of the spiritual path can be understood as a deepening of attention, learning to notice when we have wandered, learning to recognize when we have forgotten, learning to gently, again and again, bring ourselves back to what is actually happening, here and now. This is not a heroic achievement. It is a humble practice. It requires no special talent, no particular belief. Only the willingness to begin again each time we notice that we have drifted away. The practitioner who returned from the monastery was not back at square one. Something had been learned in those months of practice. The taste of freedom had been real, and even though it faded, the memory of it remained. This is how the path unfolds for most of us. We touch peace. We lose it. We touch it again. We lose it again. But each time, something subtle is shifting. We are becoming more familiar with the terrain. We are learning to recognize the signs of forgetting more quickly. We are developing a kind of inner compass that points us back toward home. The Buddha spoke of this process with great compassion. He knew that awakening does not usually happen in a flash. He compared it to the ocean floor, which slopes gradually, without sudden drops. The practice deepens slowly, imperceptibly, over time. And he offered encouragement to those who felt they were making no progress. He said that just as a carpenter cannot see the wear on the handle of their tool from day to day, but over time the wear becomes evident, so too the practitioner may not see their own progress from day to day. But the practice is working. The transformation is happening beneath the surface of awareness. Let us rest here for a moment. If you are lying down, feel the support beneath you. If you are sitting, feel your weight settling downward. If you are walking or moving, feel your feet connecting with the earth. There is nothing you need to do right now. Nothing you need to fix or figure out. Just this moment. Just this breath. Notice that you are aware. Without any effort, awareness is here. It is receiving these words. It is feeling the sensations of your body. It is present to whatever sounds may be arising in your environment. This awareness is not something you have to create. It is already here. It has always been here. Can you sense, even slightly, the peace that is native to this awareness? Before any thought is added, before any story begins to spin, there is just this open, clear presence. This is what the ancient teachers called your radiant true nature. You may not feel it strongly right now. That is perfectly fine. The sense of it comes and goes, especially at the beginning. But it is always here, whether we feel it or not. Like the sun behind the clouds, it does not cease to exist just because it is temporarily obscured. There is a practice that can help us deepen our familiarity with this awareness. It is very simple. Throughout your day, pause from time to time and ask yourself, am I aware? Do not answer with a thought. Simply notice that awareness is present. That noticing is itself the answer. In that moment of noticing, there is a gap in the stream of thought. A small space opens, and in that space, you may catch a glimpse of the peace that is always here. This is not a dramatic practice. It will not produce fireworks or visions, but over time, it begins to shift something fundamental. We become more familiar with the flavor of presence. We learn to recognize it more easily. And we start to notice more quickly when we have wandered away. The Zen tradition calls this remembering the one who hears. In the midst of all the sounds of life, who is it that hears them? In the midst of all the thoughts and feelings, who is it that knows them? That knowing awareness is what we are learning to recognize. It is what we are learning to trust. It is the home we are learning to return to. The practitioner from our story continued to practice after returning from the monastery. The daily sessions were shorter, the environment was noisier, the triggers were plentiful. But something had changed. Now there was a reference point, a memory of what was possible, a taste of freedom that called out to be revisited. And slowly, through many moments of forgetting and remembering, the practice began to take root in ordinary life. Not perfectly, not consistently, but genuinely, There would be moments in the middle of a busy day when suddenly awareness would open and the practitioner would find themselves present, just present, without any struggle. And in those moments, even the busyness was not a problem. It was simply what was happening, witnessed by an awareness that was at ease. This is the fruit of the path. Not an escape from life, but a transformation of how we meet it. Not the absence of challenges, but a different relationship to them. Not a life without waves, but a life lived from the depth of the ocean, where even the largest waves are seen as movements on the surface of something vast and still. The Buddha, in his great kindness, offered many teachings to help us on this journey. But perhaps the simplest and most direct was this: when walking, just walk. When sitting, just sit. When eating, just eat. This sounds almost too simple, but it contains the essence of the practice. When we are truly present to what we are doing, without adding commentary or resistance, there is no separation between us and our experience. There is just the activity itself, happening in awareness. And in that simplicity, we touch the peace that is always available. The challenge, of course, is that we rarely just walk, or just sit, or just eat. We walk while planning tomorrow. We sit while reviewing yesterday. We eat while worrying about next week. The body is here, but the mind is somewhere else. And in that division, we lose touch with peace. Not because peace has gone anywhere, but because we have. We have left the present moment and traveled into the realm of thought, where the small self is always busy constructing and defending and worrying. To come back is simple. We notice that we have wandered, and we gently return our attention to what is actually happening. The sensations of the body, the breath moving in and out, the sounds arriving in awareness, the simple fact of being alive, here, now. Each time we do this, we are practicing remembering. We are strengthening the pathway back home. There is a beautiful image from the Buddhist tradition that captures this journey of forgetting and remembering. It is the image of the moon reflected in water. When the water is agitated, stirred up by wind or disturbance, the reflection of the moon breaks into 1,000 scattered fragments. It becomes impossible to see the moon clearly. The reflection seems to be everywhere and nowhere at once. But when the water grows still, something magical happens. The scattered fragments begin to gather. They flow together, merge, and at last, the single, perfect reflection of the moon appears on the surface of the water. The moon, of course, has not changed at all. It has been shining steadily in the sky the whole time. It is only the reflection that was disturbed. Our true nature is like that moon. It does not come and go. It does not break apart when we are agitated and reassemble when we are calm. It simply is what it is, always shining, always present. What changes is our ability to perceive it. When the waters of our mind are churned by craving and aversion, by worry and regret, the reflection breaks into pieces. We cannot see clearly. We feel scattered, fragmented, lost. But when we allow the waters to settle, the reflection naturally reforms. We do not have to do anything to make this happen. We simply stop disturbing the water. This is the essence of meditation. Not achieving something extraordinary, but ceasing to agitate. Not grasping for special states, but allowing the natural clarity to emerge. There is a story of a traveler who spent many years searching for a precious jewel. This traveler journeyed to distant mountains, crossed vast deserts, sailed across stormy seas, always seeking, always searching. At each village along the way, the traveler would ask, "Please, can you tell me where to find the precious jewel?" An old woman at a mountain pass said, "Ah, the jewel. Yes, I have heard of it. You must cross the great desert to the south. There you will find what you seek." So the traveler crossed the desert. At an oasis, a merchant said, "The jewel? It lies beyond the western sea. Many have sought it there." So the traveler sailed the western sea. On a distant shore, a fisherman said, "The precious jewel is in the eastern mountains. That is where the wise ones say it rests." And so it went, year after year, mountain after mountain, sea after sea. Finally, old and weary, the traveler sat down at the side of a quiet road. A young child happened to pass by. "Why do you look so sad?" The child asked. "I have searched my whole life for a precious jewel," the traveler said. "I have gone everywhere, asked everyone, and still I have not found it. Perhaps it does not exist." The child tilted their head curiously. "What does it look like, this jewel?" "I do not know," the traveler admitted. "I was told I would recognize it when I found it." The child sat down beside the traveler. "My grandmother says that the most precious things are often very close. She says we overlook them because we are looking too far away." The traveler smiled sadly at the child's innocence, but something in the words stirred a memory. The traveler looked down and noticed, for the first time, a small lump in the hem of their robe. With trembling fingers, the traveler opened the stitching. There, sewn into the fabric since the very beginning of the journey, was the precious jewel. It had been there all along. This story points to the same truth. What we are seeking, we already have. What we are longing for, we already are. The peace we chase across the world, through books and teachers and practices, is sewn into the very fabric of our being. We have simply forgotten where to look. The great teacher Padmasambhava once said, "Though my view is as vast as the sky, my attention to the law of cause and effect is as fine as a grain of flour." This teaching reminds us that awakening is not an escape from the details of life. We do not touch our true nature by floating away into abstraction. We touch it in the midst of the ordinary, the particular, the immediate. When we wash dishes, we wash dishes. When we speak with a friend, we speak with a friend. When we feel sadness, we feel sadness. Nothing is excluded. Nothing is rejected. Everything becomes an opportunity to practice presence. And gradually, through this humble attention to the ordinary moments of life, something vast opens. We discover that the sky was never separate from the ground, that the ocean was never separate from the waves, that our radiant true nature was never separate from this very moment, exactly as it is. As we come to the end of this first teaching, let us take a moment to gather what we have explored. We have seen that moments of peace and openness are natural to us. They are not foreign visitors but glimpses of our true nature. They come when the constant activity of self-construction temporarily relaxes, and we taste the freedom that is always present beneath the surface. We have seen that these moments tend to fade when we return to the triggers and demands of ordinary life. This is not failure. It is simply how the process works. The habits of a lifetime do not dissolve in a single session of meditation or a single retreat. We have heard the ancient teaching that invites us to remember our radiant true nature. This remembering is the essence of the path. Not adding something new but uncovering what has always been here. And we have been offered a simple practice to pause throughout the day and notice that we are aware. To taste, even briefly, the peace that is native to awareness. To begin to familiarize ourselves with home. This is enough for now. More than enough. Before we continue, let us pause together. Rest in awareness for a moment, needing nothing to be different. When you are ready, we will continue together to explore how we construct the narrow sense of self that obscures this peace and how we might begin to loosen its grip. We have tasted the truth that peace is not something we need to create. It is something we uncover when the agitation of the mind begins to settle. Like the moon reflected clearly in still water, our true nature reveals itself when we stop disturbing the surface. But what is it, exactly, that disturbs the water? What creates the agitation that obscures our natural peace? The ancient teachers pointed to a single source, our identification with a limited sense of who we are. We build a structure in the mind, a kind of house made of thoughts and feelings and memories, and we move into it. We furnish it with our beliefs. We decorate it with our preferences, and then we forget that we built it. We mistake the house for the whole of reality. This is what the Buddha meant when he spoke of ignorance as the root of suffering. Not stupidity, but a kind of forgetting. We forget the vast sky and become fixated on a single cloud. We forget the ocean and become absorbed in a single wave. Tonight, we look more closely at this house we have built. We examine its walls, its rooms, its foundations. Not to judge ourselves for living in it, but to understand how it was constructed. For in that understanding lies the beginning of freedom. There is wisdom in the origins of words. The word identify comes from ancient roots. One root means same. Another means to make. So when we identify with something, we are making it the same as self. We are saying, in effect, this is me. This is who I am. We do this so naturally, so constantly, that we rarely notice it happening. A thought arises, and we become the thinker. An emotion surfaces, and we become the one who is angry or sad or afraid. A role emerges in our lives, and we become the parent, the worker, the friend, the seeker. None of this is wrong. It is simply how the mind works. The Buddha himself acknowledged that a sense of self is part of being human. It helps us navigate the world, make decisions, relate to others. The problem is not that we have a sense of self. The problem is when that sense becomes rigid, exclusive, and tight. When we forget that it is a construction and mistake it for the whole truth. Let us look together at what this construction is made of. First, there is the body. We identify deeply with these physical forms we inhabit. Our health, our appearance, our age, our abilities. When someone asks who we are, we might point to this body. When we look in a mirror, we say, that is me. And yet, this body has changed completely many times over the course of our lives. The infant we once were shares almost no physical material with the adult we have become. Every cell has been replaced, many times over. The face in the mirror today is not the face of 10 years ago, or 20, or 40. Still, we say, this is me. Then there are the emotions. We identify strongly with our most familiar feelings. If we tend toward anxiety, we may think of ourselves as an anxious person. If we often feel sadness, we may carry an identity as someone who is melancholy or depressed. If anger arises frequently, we may see ourselves as someone with a temper. These emotional patterns feel so much like who we are. They color our experience of the world. They shape how we relate to others. And yet, emotions are by nature impermanent. They arise, they stay for a time, they pass away. No emotion has ever lasted forever. Still, we say, this is who I am. Then there are the thoughts, the beliefs, the opinions. We build elaborate structures of ideas in the mind. Political views, religious convictions, opinions about how things should be. These become so familiar that we defend them as though we were defending ourselves. An attack on our beliefs feels like an attack on our very being. And yet, our beliefs have changed many times. What we were certain of at 20, we may have abandoned by 40. What we hold dear today, we may release tomorrow. Thoughts arise and pass, like clouds moving through the sky. Still, we say, this is what I think. This is who I am. And then there are the roles: parent, child, worker, friend, teacher, student, helper, leader. We wear these roles like garments, and sometimes we forget we can take them off. We become so identified with a role that losing it feels like losing ourselves. A person retires after decades of work and suddenly does not know who they are. A parent watches their children grow up and leave and feels a hollowness where their purpose used to be. A relationship ends and it feels as though part of us has been torn away. Still, we say, this is my place in the world. This is who I am. Let us explore a story about how we carry our identities, often without realizing it. There was once a professional who worked in a field that required formal credentials. For many years, this person had listed their qualifications on every official document, their degrees, their certifications, the letters that could follow their name. But there was one item on the list that did not quite fit with the others. Tucked among the impressive qualifications was a small credential from childhood, a membership in a group for young people, a badge of belonging from many decades past. For years, this appeared on formal documents sent to important institutions. No one ever questioned it. No one ever asked what it meant. Then one day, a colleague looked at the list and said, "I recognize most of these. But what is this one? I have never seen it before." The professional smiled. "Ah, that. It is from when I was a child. A group I belonged to long ago." The colleague laughed gently. "And you still list it? After all these years?" "I suppose I do," the professional said. I had not really thought about it. That evening, the professional sat quietly and reflected. Why had that small credential remained on the list for so long? It served no practical purpose. No one in the professional world would recognize it or care about it. And yet, it had been carried forward, year after year, document after document. Some part of the self had held onto it. Some thread of identity was woven into that simple membership from childhood. This is how we are. We carry pieces of identity that we have long forgotten we are carrying. They become part of the wallpaper of self, so familiar that we no longer see them. And some of these pieces are harmless, even endearing. A childhood memory, a sentimental attachment, a small eccentricity. But some of the pieces we carry cause us great suffering, and these are worth examining more closely. The Buddha taught that suffering arises when we cling to things that are impermanent, and the sense of self, he observed, is perhaps the thing we cling to most tightly of all. We cling to our bodies, and they age and change and eventually fail us. We cling to our emotions, and they shift and transform beyond our control. We cling to our beliefs, and life challenges them and sometimes shatters them. We cling to our roles, and circumstances change and the roles dissolve. In all of this clinging, there is a kind of constant anxiety, a subtle or not so subtle sense that what we are holding on to might slip away, that who we think we are might be threatened or diminished or lost. This is the suffering of identification, not the natural arising of a sense of self, but the tight grip with which we hold it, the fear with which we defend it, the rigidity that prevents us from flowing with the changes of life. A Zen teacher once said, "The problem is not that you have a self. The problem is that you have made it into a prison." So how does this prison get built? How do we come to identify so tightly with things that are not the whole of who we are? The teachers speak of something we might call disconnection. When we feel separated from life, from others, from our own depths, something in us begins to grasp. We reach for anchors. We look for solid ground. And we build a self out of whatever materials are available. For some, this disconnection begins early. A child who does not feel fully seen or understood begins to construct a self that might earn love. A young person who feels they do not belong begins to build an identity around being different, or being exceptional, or being invisible. The construction is not deliberate. It is the natural response of a mind that is trying to find safety. For others, the disconnection comes later. A loss, a failure, a shattering of what we thought was certain. And in the aftermath, we scramble to reassemble a sense of who we are. There is an old teaching that says we are like waves that have forgotten we are the ocean. Each wave feels separate, individual, alone. Each wave rises and fears falling. Each wave looks at other waves and sees strangers, competitors, threats. But the wave is never separate from the ocean. It cannot be. It is made of ocean. It rises from ocean. It returns to ocean. The separation is an illusion, a trick of perspective. When we remember our connection to the whole, the grip of the small self naturally loosens. We do not have to fight it or destroy it. We simply see it in context. Yes, there is a wave, and the wave is an expression of the ocean. Both are true. Let us explore another story. There was a young person who grew up feeling different from those around them. While others seemed to move easily through the world, this young person felt awkward, uncertain, out of place. Why can I not be like everyone else? They asked their grandmother one evening. The grandmother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Come, let us take a walk." They walked together to a garden where many flowers were growing. The grandmother pointed to the flowers. "Look," she said, "do you see how different they all are? Some are tall, some are short. Some are bright, some are pale. Some bloom in the morning, some in the evening. Do you think the rose is troubled because it is not a lily? No, the young person said. But flowers are different from people. Are they? The grandmother asked. Each flower grows from the same earth. Each is fed by the same rain, warmed by the same sun. They are all different expressions of the same life. And so are you. So are all of us. But I feel so separate, the young person said. I feel like I do not belong. The grandmother took their hand. That feeling of not belonging is very painful. I know it well. But listen to me. The feeling is real, but what it tells you is not true. You belong to life itself. You are life, expressing itself in your own unique way. No one else can be what you are. And what you are is needed. The young person did not fully understand these words, but something in them planted a seed that would grow slowly over many years, a seed of remembering. There is a teaching attributed to the Buddha that goes, you yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. This is not a teaching about ego or pride. It is a teaching about belonging. When we truly understand that we are expressions of the same life that moves through all beings, we naturally extend to ourselves the same compassion we would offer to others. But when we are caught in the prison of a limited identity, this is very difficult. We compare ourselves to others and find ourselves lacking. We measure ourselves against standards and fall short. We carry judgments about who we are and who we should be, and the weight of these judgments is exhausting. The small self is never at peace because it is always under threat. There is always someone who is more successful, more attractive, more talented, more loved. There is always some way we do not measure up. The comparing mind never rests. A student once confessed to a teacher, I cannot stop comparing myself to others. Wherever I go, I measure myself against them, and I always come up short. The teacher nodded with understanding. This is very common. The comparing mind is always hungry, never satisfied. Tell me, when you compare yourself to someone you see as better than you, how do you feel? Small, the student said. Inadequate. Like I should try harder. And when you compare yourself to someone you see as less fortunate, the student thought for a moment. Sometimes I feel relief. Sometimes I feel guilty for feeling relief. And sometimes I feel afraid that I could become like them. So comparison brings no peace, either way, the teacher observed. No, the student admitted. It never does. This is because comparison only makes sense if we are truly separate beings, each with a fixed amount of worth that can be measured against others. But this is not how life works. We are not separate containers holding different amounts of value. We are all expressions of the same source, each unique, each necessary, each complete in ourselves. But how do I stop comparing? The student asked. You do not stop it by fighting it, the teacher said. You stop it by seeing through it. Each time the comparing mind arises, simply notice, comparing. And then ask, who is comparing? Who is this one that feels small or large depending on the measurement? Look for this one. Can you find it? Is it solid? Is it real? The student was quiet, turning the questions over in their mind. When you look closely, the teacher continued, you will find that the one who compares is made of thoughts. Just thoughts, arising and passing. And beneath the thoughts, there is awareness. and awareness does not compare. It simply is, complete in itself, and so we suffer. Not because there is something wrong with us, but because we have mistaken a small part of ourselves for the whole. We have identified with the wave and forgotten the ocean. There is a particular kind of suffering that arises from this limited identification. The teachers describe it as a feeling of constant inadequacy, a sense that we are not enough, that we need to be more, do more, have more in order to be worthy of love and belonging. This feeling is remarkably common. It crosses all boundaries of age and culture and circumstance. The wealthy feel it. The accomplished feel it. The admired feel it. No amount of external success seems to quiet the inner voice that whispers, "You are still not enough." A teacher was once approached by a student who had achieved much in the eyes of the world. "I have done everything I was supposed to do," the student said. "I have worked hard. I have succeeded. I have earned respect. And yet, I still feel empty. I still feel like I am waiting for my real life to begin. What is wrong with me?" The teacher listened with great kindness. Then she said, "Nothing is wrong with you. You have simply been looking in the wrong direction. You have been trying to fill a hole that cannot be filled from the outside. Then how is it filled?" The student asked. "It is not filled," the teacher said. "It is seen through. When you look closely at this sense of not being enough, you will find that it is made of thoughts. Old thoughts, repeated so many times that they feel like truth. But thoughts are not truth. They are just thoughts. And beneath all your thoughts about who you are, there is a presence that has never been lacking anything. It is already whole. It is already complete. It is what you are. How do I find this presence?" The student asked. "You do not find it," the teacher said. "You stop hiding from it. You stop covering it over with all your efforts to become something else. Just for a moment, stop trying to improve yourself. Stop trying to become worthy. Simply rest in what you are, right now, without adding anything. That is the beginning." This teaching is not about abandoning our responsibilities or giving up on growth. It is about recognizing that our deepest worthiness does not depend on any of our achievements or failures. It is already present. It is the ground we stand on, not something we must climb toward. When we understand this, even a little, something relaxes. We can still work. We can still grow. We can still play our roles in the world. But we do so from a different place. Not from the desperate striving of a self that feels insufficient, but from the natural expression of a being that is already whole. The Zen masters spoke of this as effortless effort. Not the effort of forcing or straining, but the effort of a river flowing toward the sea. The river does not struggle to reach the ocean. It simply follows its nature. And in following its nature, it arrives where it was always going. As we have seen, we build our sense of identity from many materials: body, emotions, thoughts, roles, beliefs. And we hold this identity together with something else, something that runs through all the other pieces like thread through beads. We hold it together with a story. We are always telling ourselves a story about who we are. This story includes our past, our present, and our imagined future. It includes our victories and our defeats, our hopes and our fears. It includes what we think others think of us, and what we wish they would think. This story is constantly running in the background of our minds. We add to it, revise it, defend it. We present edited versions of it to others. We compare our story to the stories we imagine others are living. And the story feels so real, so solid, so much like who we are. But here is something important to notice. You are the one telling the story. You are the one aware of the story being told. And that awareness is not inside the story. It is what the story arises within. The story of self is like a character in a dream. The character seems real while we are dreaming. But when we wake, we see that we were always the dreamer, not the character. This does not mean the story is worthless, or that we should try to destroy it. Stories are how humans make meaning. They help us navigate our lives, connect with others, understand our experience. But when we mistake the story for the whole truth, we become trapped inside it. The invitation is not to stop telling stories, but to hold them more lightly, to recognize them as stories, to remember that we are the vast awareness within which all stories arise and pass away. The Buddha offered a teaching that can help us with this. He taught that all conditioned things are impermanent. Everything that has come together will eventually come apart. Everything that has arisen will eventually pass away. This is not a grim teaching. It is a liberating one. Because if everything is impermanent, then our suffering is impermanent. Our confusion is impermanent. The tight grip of our limited identity is impermanent. And beneath all the impermanent things, what remains? Awareness remains. The knowing presence that witnesses all the arising and passing away. This awareness is not a thing that can be grasped or lost. It is what we are, at the deepest level. When we rest in this awareness, even briefly, the whole structure of self is seen in a new light. We see that we have been building and rebuilding this structure our whole lives. We see how much energy goes into maintaining it. And we see that it is not as solid as it seemed. This seeing is not a destruction. It is a relaxation. The walls of the prison become transparent. We are still here, still living our lives, still playing our roles. But we are no longer confined. We are no longer convinced that the prison is all there is. There is another story worth exploring here, about how tightly we can hold our identities and how freedom comes when we least expect it. An accomplished scholar had spent a lifetime building a reputation. Every achievement was carefully recorded. Every honor was proudly displayed. The scholar's identity was woven entirely from accomplishments, from being recognized as someone important. One day, a fire swept through the village where the scholar lived. The building that held all the records, all the certificates, all the evidence of a life of achievement was destroyed. The scholar stood in the ashes, weeping. A simple monk happened to pass by. He saw the scholar's grief and stopped. "What has happened, friend?" the monk asked. "Everything is gone," the scholar said. "My whole life, my achievements, my reputation, all of it turned to ash." The monk looked at the ruins for a long moment. Then he looked at the scholar. "I see you standing here," the monk said. "I see you breathing. I see you feeling grief. Are you gone?" "You do not understand," the scholar said bitterly. "Without these things, who am I? I am nobody." "Ah," the monk said gently. "So you believe you were those papers, those records, those honors? They proved who I was. The monk shook his head slowly. They proved what you did. They proved what others thought of you. But who you are needs no proof. Who you are cannot burn. The scholar stared at the monk. Easy for you to say. You have renounced everything. You have nothing to lose. I have lost many things, the monk said. I have lost youth. I have lost loved ones. I have lost dreams I once cherished. And each loss taught me the same lesson. What can be lost was never truly mine. What I truly am remains, no matter what comes or goes. The scholar was silent. The words were difficult to hear, yet something in them rang true. What do I do now? The scholar finally asked. Now, the monk said, you have a great opportunity. All the things you were hiding behind have been cleared away. Perhaps, for the first time, you can discover who remains when nothing remains. This is the beginning of wisdom, not the end of life. The monk continued on his way, and the scholar stood in the ashes, contemplating a question that had never been asked before. Who am I, without all the things I thought I was? This question is one we rarely ask when life is comfortable. We are too busy maintaining our identities, polishing our stories, comparing ourselves to others. But when life strips away our familiar anchors, when loss or change removes what we thought we depended on, the question arises naturally. Who am I, really? The great teachers did not offer a quick answer to this question. They knew that any answer would simply become another layer of identity, another wall in the prison. Instead, they encouraged their students to sit with the question, to let it work on them, to allow it to dissolve the false certainties rather than replace them with new ones. A master was once asked by a student, "Who was I before I was born?" The master replied, "Ask the question, but do not expect an answer. The asking is more valuable than any answer could be." "But I want to know," the student insisted. "The one who wants to know is part of the question," the master said. When you truly investigate who is asking, something opens that no words can describe. Be patient. Stay with the question. Let it do its work. There is a beautiful quality that begins to emerge when we hold our identities more lightly. The teachers call it spaciousness. When we are tightly identified with who we think we are, there is a constriction. Everything feels personal. Every event is either a threat or an opportunity for this self we are maintaining. We are constantly on guard, constantly managing, constantly efforting. But when the identification begins to soften, space appears. Things that once felt like emergencies now feel like passing weather. People who once seemed threatening now seem like fellow travelers, doing their best with their own burdens. Life itself, which once felt like a problem to be solved, begins to feel like a mystery to be lived. This spaciousness is not indifference. We still care. We may even care more deeply than before, because we are no longer so defended, so armored against life. But the caring comes from a different place. It comes from connection rather than separation. It comes from love rather than fear. The Buddha spoke of this as the difference between a clenched fist and an open hand. A clenched fist can hold on to a few small things very tightly. An open hand can receive everything that life offers and can also let it go when the time comes. We have explored how we build our sense of self from many materials and how this building can become a prison when we hold it too tightly. We have seen that the invitation is not to destroy the self, but to recognize it as a construction, to hold it more lightly, and to remember the vast awareness within which it arises. This is gentle work. It is not a battle against the ego. It is a gradual softening, a patient inquiry, a willingness to question what we have always assumed. And it begins simply with noticing. Noticing when we feel defended. Noticing when we feel threatened. Noticing when we are comparing ourselves to others. Noticing when we are telling ourselves the old, familiar story of who we are and what we lack. Each moment of noticing is a moment of freedom, not because the patterns immediately dissolve, but because we have stepped back just slightly from being completely lost in them. We have remembered, even for an instant, that we are the awareness watching the patterns, not the patterns themselves. Let us rest here for a moment. Feel the body breathing. Notice the simple fact of being aware. There is nothing you need to figure out right now, nothing you need to become. And when you are ready, we will continue together. Let us now turn to something different, something we carry with us every moment of every day, something that feels more like me than almost anything else. We turn to the body. Of all the things we identify with, the body is perhaps the most fundamental. It is with us from our first breath to our last. It is how others recognize us. It is how we move through the world, touch and are touched, sense and are sensed. When someone asks who we are, we might point to this form. When we look in a mirror, we say, without hesitation, that is me. And yet, what is this body really? The Buddha invited his students to contemplate the body closely, not with judgment, but with curiosity. He asked them to notice how the body is constantly changing, how it is made of elements borrowed from the earth, the water, the air, how it arises, transforms, and eventually returns to the elements from which it came. This contemplation was not meant to create disgust or rejection. It was meant to loosen the grip of identification, to help us see that while we have a body, we are not only a body, that something more vast is looking out through these eyes. Let us begin with a simple observation. The body you have today is not the body you had as a child. The cells have been replaced many times over. The face has changed. The height, the weight, the capabilities, all different. If you look at a photograph of yourself from decades ago, you might barely recognize the person looking back. And yet, something has remained constant through all these changes. The sense of being here, of being aware, of being you. That has not changed, even as everything else has transformed. This is worth noticing. It points to something important. The body changes continuously, but the awareness that knows the body remains. Which one, then, is more truly who we are? We are not asked to reject the body or to pretend it does not matter. The body is precious. It is the vehicle through which we experience this life, taste its sweetness and its sorrow, touch and be touched by the world. But we are invited to hold it more lightly, to recognize it as a temporary home, not as the totality of who we are. There is a story about someone who learned this lesson in an unexpected way. A reader once spent many months with a book, a novel that followed the life of a woman who looked very different from most people. She was much smaller than others, her body shaped in a way that set her apart from birth. At first, the reader noticed there was a subtle barrier. Some part of the mind kept seeing the character as other, as different, as someone whose experience could not quite be understood. The physical difference seemed to define everything about her. But as the pages turned, something began to shift. The reader entered into the character's inner world. Her hopes, her fears, her longing for love and belonging, her quiet courage in the face of cruelty, her moments of joy and her seasons of grief. And slowly, the physical difference faded from awareness. What remained was simply a human being, as vast and complex and tender as any other. The body that had seemed to define her became almost transparent, and through it shone the unmistakable light of a soul. The reader finished the book late one night and sat in silence for a long time. "I have been blind," the reader thought. "How many people have I looked at and seen only their bodies? How many times have I let a physical form become a wall that blocked me from seeing the being inside?" This is what happens when we identify too strongly with bodies, our own or others. We reduce the infinite to a shape. We mistake the container for what it contains. We see the wave and forget the ocean. The way we see our own bodies is shaped, more than we might realize, by the voices around us. From the time we are young, we receive messages about what bodies should look like. What is beautiful? What is acceptable? What is desirable? These messages come from family, from friends, from the images that surround us everywhere we look. And most of these messages are impossible to live up to. They describe ideals that exist nowhere in nature. They set standards that guarantee failure, that ensure we will always find ourselves lacking. A young person looks in the mirror and thinks, "I am too this. I am not enough that." And a conclusion forms, not just about the body, but about the self. Something is wrong with me. I am not acceptable as I am. This is a quiet tragedy that unfolds in countless hearts, often invisibly. The war with one's own body, the endless measuring and comparing, the shame that settles in and makes itself at home. The Buddha would have recognized this suffering. He taught that we create prisons for ourselves through our attachments and aversions. And perhaps no attachment is more painful than clinging to an image of how our body should be. No aversion more exhausting than the constant rejection of the body we actually have. Let us explore a story about someone who found freedom from this war. There was a dancer who had trained since childhood, whose entire identity was built around the body's ability to move with grace and precision. For decades, the dancer lived inside this identity, earning recognition and admiration, feeling most alive when performing. Then an injury came. Not dramatic, but persistent. The kind that does not heal completely, that becomes a permanent companion. At first, the dancer fought against it. "This cannot be happening," the dancer said to a trusted friend. "Dancing is who I am. Without it, I am nothing." The friend listened quietly, then asked, "When you dance and you feel most alive, what is it that feels alive?" The dancer thought about this. "I do not understand the question. Is it your legs that feel joy? Is it your arms? Or is there something else? Something that uses the body to express itself, something that experiences the joy?" The dancer was silent for a long moment. "I never thought of it that way. There is something that experiences the dance. The body is how it expresses, but the body is not the experiencer. And that experiencer," the friend said gently, "is it injured? This question opened something in the dancer's mind. In the weeks that followed, a slow transformation began. The body could no longer move as it once had, but the dancer began to notice that the creativity, the sensitivity to beauty, the love of expression, none of these had been damaged. They were still present, still alive, still looking for ways to flow into the world. The dancer began to teach, to choreograph, to find new channels for the same life force that had always been present. The form had changed. What animated the form had not. Years later, the dancer reflected, "I thought the injury took everything from me. I was wrong. It took only what was never really mine, the temporary ability of this particular body. It left untouched what has always been here, what will continue in some form, long after this body is finished." There is a teaching that says, peace comes not from having what we want, but from wanting what we have. Applied to the body, this is a radical invitation. Not to stop caring for the body, not to abandon health or hygiene, but to stop the war. To lay down the weapons of judgment and comparison. To allow this body, exactly as it is in this moment, to simply be. This is not easy. The habits of criticism run deep. The voices of comparison are loud and persistent. But even a small movement in this direction brings relief. Even a moment of acceptance is a moment of peace. An elder once shared a reflection with a group of younger people who had gathered to learn. "When I was young," the elder said, "I spent so much energy wishing my body was different. I wanted to be taller. I wanted to be more graceful. I wanted to fit the images I saw around me. I wasted years in this struggle. What changed?" One of the young people asked. "Time," the elder said, smiling. "Time and attention. As I grew older, I began to notice that the body had its own wisdom. It had carried me through so much. It had healed from illness and injury. It had allowed me to embrace the people I love, to taste good food, to feel the sun on my face. I began to see it not as an enemy to be conquered, but as a companion on the journey." "But what about when the body fails?" another young person asked. "What about when it cannot do what it used to do?" The elder nodded slowly. "This is the great teaching that age offers. The body will change. It will slow down. It will eventually stop altogether. And if our sense of who we are is completely wrapped up in the body, this is terrifying. But if we have begun to sense that we are something more than the body, something that the body expresses but does not exhaust, then the changes become less frightening. They become part of the natural unfolding, the autumn of a life that has had its spring and summer." Let us explore another story. There was a person who, in middle age, caught a glimpse of something startling in the mirror. For just a moment, it was not their own face looking back. It was the face of a parent. The same lines around the eyes. The same shape of the jaw. The same expression that had once seemed to belong to someone else entirely. The person stood very still, looking at this familiar stranger in the glass. When did this happen? They wondered. When did I become my mother? My father? And then a deeper question arose. If the face has changed so completely and will continue to change, who is it that looks out from behind these eyes? Who has been here all along, watching the face transform from child to youth, to adult to elder? This is not a morbid question. It is a liberating one. Because when we begin to sense the one who watches, the awareness that has been present through every change, we touch something that does not age, something that was never born and will never die. The great Zen master Dogen wrote, "To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be enlightened by all things." What does it mean to forget the self? It does not mean amnesia. It means releasing the tight grip on who we think we are. It means allowing the boundaries to soften so that we can be touched by life, enlightened by the 10,000 things that surround us. When we are less identified with this body, less convinced that it defines and limits who we are, we become more available to life. The walls come down, the separation dissolves, and what remains is simple presence, open and undefended. There is a story about a child who asked a very old grandparent a simple question. "Were you always old?" The child asked with innocent curiosity. The grandparent smiled. "No, little one. I was once your age, and then I was your parents' age, and slowly, I became what you see now. But what happened to the young one you were?" The child asked. "Where did they go?" The grandparent considered this carefully. "That is a wonderful question. The body changed, like water flowing in a river. The water that was here yesterday has moved downstream, and new water has taken its place. Yet the river is still the river. So you are like a river?" The child asked. "Perhaps," the grandparent said. "But even more than that, I am like the one who sits by the river and watches it flow. The water changes constantly, but the watching does not change. When I was young, I watched from these eyes. Now that I am old, I still watch from these same eyes, though the eyes themselves have changed." "That is confusing," the child said. "It is," the grandparent agreed. "And also very simple. Look at me. Do you see only an old body? Or do you see someone looking back at you?" The child looked carefully. "I see you," they said finally. "I see someone in there." "Yes," the grandparent said. "And that someone has always been here. That someone will always be here, even when this body is gone. That is the secret that age teaches, if we are willing to learn." There is a particular suffering that comes with aging in a culture that worships youth. The body begins to show the marks of time. A new line appears on the face. A movement that was once effortless now requires attention. The eyes need help to see what they once saw clearly. The hair changes color, or thins, or disappears. And something in us can feel this as an insult, as a betrayal, as though the body were failing to keep its promises. A practitioner once spoke of this to a teacher. "I find myself at war with aging," the practitioner said. "Every change feels like a loss. Every sign of time passing feels like something is being taken from me. I know this is not wise, but I cannot seem to stop." The teacher listened with compassion. "You are fighting a battle that cannot be won," she said gently. "Time will have its way with everybody. This is not punishment. It is simply how things are. But how do I make peace with it?" The practitioner asked. "How do I stop feeling like something is wrong?" "You begin by noticing that the one who is at war is not the body itself," the teacher said. "It is the mind, with its ideas about how things should be. The body is simply doing what bodies do. It is the mind that adds the story of wrongness, of loss, of insult. So I should just accept it." "Acceptance is not resignation," the teacher said. It is not giving up. It is simply seeing clearly. It is recognizing what is actually happening without adding layers of resistance and complaint. When you see clearly, without the war, you may discover that what you feared losing was never really yours to begin with, and what you truly are cannot be lost. There is wisdom that sometimes comes with the later seasons of life. Not automatically, not to everyone, but to those who have paid attention. This wisdom sees that the body is like a garment. We wear it for a time, and then we lay it down. The garment may be beautiful or plain, healthy or frail, but it is not who we are. We are the one who wears it. A very old teacher was once asked by a young student, "Are you not afraid? Your body is so fragile now." The teacher laughed, a sound like dry leaves rustling. "Afraid of what? That this robe will wear out? It has been wearing out since the day I put it on. What is there to fear in the natural completion of things? But what happens when it is finished?" The student asked. "What happens to the wave when it returns to the ocean?" The teacher replied, "Does it end, or does it simply remember what it always was?" The student thought about this. "But how can you be so calm about it?" "Because I have spent many years getting to know the one who wears this robe," the teacher said. The robe is not the wearer. The body is not the awareness. When you know this, not just as an idea but as a living truth, there is nothing left to fear. There is only gratitude for the time we have been given and curiosity about what comes next. How we see our own bodies shapes how we see the bodies of others. When we are at war with ourselves, critical and comparing, we project that war outward. We reduce others to their physical forms. We judge and categorize. We see bodies instead of beings. But when we begin to make peace with our own form, something shifts in how we see everyone. The barriers soften. The labels lose their power. We begin to see the light shining through each unique form, the same light that shines through us. There was a caregiver who spent many years tending to those whose bodies were failing. The work was difficult, and at first, the caregiver found it hard to see past the illness, the frailty, the decline. But over time, something changed. "I began to notice," the caregiver later reflected, "that there was someone behind the eyes of each person I cared for. Someone whole. Someone vast. The body might be broken, but that presence was unbroken. And when I learned to look for it, to speak to it, everything changed. The work stopped being about managing bodies. It became about honoring souls. This is the gift that comes when we loosen our identification with physical form. We see more truly. We love more freely. We recognize the deep presence in each being we encounter. The messages we receive about bodies begin very early and run very deep. A child learns quickly what is considered attractive and what is not. What kinds of bodies are celebrated and what kinds are ignored or mocked. These lessons are rarely spoken directly. They seep in through images, through glances, through the thousand small cues that tell us where we stand in the invisible hierarchy of physical worth. By the time we are grown, these messages have become part of how we see. We do not even notice them anymore. They have become the water we swim in, invisible and everywhere. A teacher once gathered a group of students for a simple exercise. "Close your eyes," the teacher said, "and bring to mind someone you consider beautiful." The students sat quietly, each conjuring an image. "Now," the teacher continued, "notice what kind of body this person has. Notice what they look like. And ask yourself, where did I learn that this is beautiful? The room was very still. We think our ideas of beauty are natural, universal, obvious, the teacher said. But they are learned. They are cultural. They change from place to place and time to time. What one era considers beautiful, another may ignore. What one culture celebrates, another may reject. So beauty is not real? A student asked. Beauty is very real, the teacher said. But it is not limited to what we have been taught to see. When we look with fresh eyes, with eyes not conditioned by culture, we begin to see beauty everywhere. In every face, in every form, in the gnarled hands of the very old and the wrinkled face of a newborn. Beauty is the light shining through the form, not the form itself. Another student spoke up. But it is hard to see with fresh eyes. The conditioning is so strong. Yes, the teacher agreed. This is why we practice. Not to force ourselves to see differently, but to notice when we are seeing through the old filters. Each time we notice, we have a choice. We can believe the filter, or we can look again, more openly. Over time, the filters begin to lose their power. We begin to see what has always been here. There is a particular form of suffering that comes when the body cannot do what we ask of it. Illness arrives, unexpected and unwelcome. An accident changes everything in a moment. The body that once seemed reliable becomes unpredictable, limited, a source of pain rather than pleasure. In these times, the identification with body is tested most severely. If I am my body and my body is failing, then I am failing. If my worth is tied to what my body can do, and my body can do less and less, then my worth is diminishing. But there is another way to meet these challenges. A person who had lived with chronic illness for many years was asked how they managed to remain at peace. At first, I was not at peace, they said. I fought against it. I raged against what was happening. I felt betrayed by my own body. What changed? The questioner asked. I began to notice that the part of me that was suffering was not the body itself. The body was simply doing what bodies do, responding to conditions, finding its own balance. It was my mind that was adding the story of unfairness, of failure, of loss. It was my identification with how things should be that was causing the deepest pain. So you stopped caring about the body? No, the person said. I care for it as best I can. I listen to it. I give it what it needs. But I stopped believing that it was me. I stopped thinking that its limitations were my limitations. There is something in me that remains whole, no matter what happens to the body. I have learned to rest in that. The Buddha spoke of the body as a guest house. Visitors come and go. Health visits, and then illness. Strength visits, and then weakness. Youth visits, and then age. We are the host, welcoming each visitor, offering them tea, and then allowing them to leave when their time has come. This is a gentle way to hold the experience of embodiment. Not clinging to any visitor, not pushing any away. Simply receiving what comes and releasing what goes. And beneath all the visitors, beneath all the coming and going, there is the host. The awareness that remains, unchanging, through every season of the body's life. We began this reflection by noting that the body is perhaps the most intimate thing we identify with. It is with us always. It is how we experience the world. And we have seen that this identification, when held too tightly, causes suffering. We wage wars against our own flesh. We judge and compare. We fear change, and we resist the natural unfolding of time. But we have also seen another possibility. We can hold the body more lightly. We can appreciate it without being imprisoned by it. We can care for it while knowing that we are not limited to it. The body is a gift, a temporary home, a vehicle for this brief and precious journey. May we learn to inhabit it with gratitude and to see through it to the vastness that we truly are. There is one more reflection worth holding as we prepare to continue. The same awareness that looks out from your eyes looks out from every pair of eyes you will ever meet. The same presence that dwells in your body dwells in every body you will ever encounter. We are not as separate as we seem. When we see a body that is different from ours, whether in age or ability or appearance, we can remember there is the same light shining through that form. There is the same awareness, having a different experience, wearing a different garment, but not different in its essence. This understanding changes how we move through the world. We stop seeing strangers and start seeing family. We stop seeing bodies and start seeing beings. And in that seeing, something in us comes home. Let us pause here for a moment. Feel the body as it is right now. The breath moving, the heart beating, this faithful companion carrying you through another day. And rest in the awareness that knows it all. And when you are ready, we will continue. Let us now explore a force that shapes our experience perhaps more than any other. A force so constant, so familiar, that we often do not notice it at all. This force is wanting. From the moment we wake in the morning until we fall asleep at night, wanting moves through us. We want the warmth of the blanket. We want the first sip of tea. We want the day to go smoothly. We want to be liked, to be successful, to be comfortable, to be loved. Wanting is not wrong. It is part of being alive. It moves us to eat when we are hungry, to seek shelter when we are cold, to reach out when we are lonely. Without wanting, we would not survive. But there is a particular kind of wanting that causes great suffering. It is the wanting that becomes our center of gravity, the wanting that narrows our vision until we can see nothing else, the wanting that convinces us that happiness lies just around the next corner, if only we can reach it. This is what the Buddha called craving, and he identified it as one of the primary sources of human suffering. There is an old saying, when a pickpocket meets a saint, all they see is pockets. Let this image settle for a moment. Here is a being of great wisdom and compassion, a presence that could offer guidance, peace, perhaps even liberation. But the pickpocket cannot see any of this. Their vision has been narrowed by wanting. They see only what they are looking for. They miss everything else. This is what wanting does to us. It narrows our perception. It filters our experience. We move through a world of infinite richness, but we see only what relates to our current desire. Think of a time when you were very hungry. What did you notice as you walked through the world? You noticed places where food might be found, signs for restaurants, the smell of cooking. Everything else faded into the background. Or think of a time when you were anxious about something important. A meeting, a conversation, a decision. How much of the beauty around you were you able to take in? How present were you to the small gifts of the moment? When wanting is strong, the present moment becomes merely a means to an end. We are not here. We are already somewhere else, in an imagined future where the wanting has been satisfied. There is a Tibetan word for this kind of stickiness. It describes the quality of being hooked, caught, unable to let go. Like honey on the fingers, the wanting clings to us, and we cling to it. We can see this in small ways throughout any ordinary day. The way our attention snaps toward the things we want. The way we lean forward, reaching. The way our minds rehearse the getting of what we desire. And we can see it in larger patterns that shape entire lives. The career built on wanting recognition. The relationships formed around wanting security. The choices made again and again from the same deep wanting that never seems to be satisfied. Let us explore a story about someone who discovered this truth in an unexpected way. There was a young person who loved to play elaborate strategy games. Not just simple diversions, but complex worlds with beautiful landscapes, intricate stories, and systems of achievement where each accomplishment unlocked new levels and abilities. For years, this young person spent hours immersed in these worlds. And for years, something felt slightly hollow about the experience, though it was hard to name what was wrong. One day, a friend asked, "What do you love most about these games?" The young person thought carefully. "The sense of progress, I suppose. The feeling of accomplishing something, of getting better, of reaching the next level." "And the stories?" the friend asked. "The beautiful worlds they create? I've heard these games have wonderful art and music and tales." The young person paused. This was uncomfortable to admit. "Honestly, I do not pay much attention to those things. I am usually focused on what I need to do next, where I need to go, what I need to accomplish. The scenery just kind of passes by." "So you are always on your way somewhere," the friend observed. "Never quite arriving. I never thought of it that way. But yes, I suppose that is true. And when you do arrive, when you reach the next level, earn the next achievement, there is a moment of satisfaction," the young person said slowly. "But it fades quickly. And then I am looking toward the next thing. So the game is not really about playing," the friend said gently. "It is about always wanting what comes next." This conversation stayed with the young person for a long time. It began to reveal something that extended far beyond games. The same pattern was everywhere, always moving toward the next accomplishment, the next purchase, the next experience, rarely resting in what was already here. The Buddha spoke often about this pattern. He called it the hungry ghost realm, a state of being where we are driven by endless craving that can never be satisfied. Imagine a being with a vast, empty belly and a tiny, narrow throat. No matter how much it consumes, it can never take in enough to feel full. It is always hungry, always reaching, always wanting more. This is a vivid image of what happens when wanting takes over. We achieve something, and for a moment there is relief. But the relief fades quickly, and the wanting returns. We acquire something, and briefly we are satisfied. But soon the satisfaction dims, and we are looking for the next thing. This is not a moral failing. It is simply how the mind works when it is caught in craving. The temporary nature of satisfaction is built into the system. No external thing can permanently fill the emptiness, because the emptiness is not really about the things at all. A teacher once illustrated this with a simple question. Think of something you wanted very much, the teacher said to a student. Something you finally got. A home of my own, the student said. I dreamed of it for years. And when you got it? How long did the satisfaction last? The student thought carefully. A few weeks, perhaps. Maybe a month. I was so happy at first. I would walk through the rooms just feeling grateful. But then it became normal. The wanting was gone, but so was the joy. And then what happened? Then I started wanting to improve it. New furniture, a better garden, repairs and renovations. The wanting started again, just directed at different things. So the wanting did not end when you got what you wanted, the teacher observed. It simply found a new object. Yes, the student admitted. It seems the wanting itself is endless. Now you are seeing clearly, the teacher said. The wanting is not really about the objects. The objects are just screens onto which we project the wanting. The wanting itself is a habit of mind. It will continue as long as we believe that the next thing will finally bring lasting peace. But nothing ever does, the student said. Nothing external, no. The peace you are seeking is not in any object. It is in the stillness that remains when wanting rests. There is a difference between healthy aspiration and addictive craving. This is an important distinction. Healthy aspiration moves towards something meaningful. It has energy and direction, but it does not grip. It can work toward a goal while still being present to the journey. It can want something without being possessed by the wanting. Addictive craving is different. It takes over. It narrows vision. It sacrifices the present moment for an imagined future that never quite arrives. And when it gets what it wants, the satisfaction is fleeting, quickly replaced by the next craving. The difference is not always in what we want, but in how we hold the wanting. A gardener may work for years to cultivate a beautiful garden. If the gardener is present to each day's work, finding joy in the soil and the seeds and the slow unfolding, this is healthy aspiration. The goal gives direction, but the journey is where life is lived. But if the gardener is always impatient, always dissatisfied with the current state, always focused on how the garden should look rather than how it does look, this is craving. The goal has become a tyrant, stealing the joy of each moment in the name of some future perfection that will never arrive. Let us explore another story. There was a merchant who had achieved great success. Everything they had reached for, they had attained. Wealth, recognition, a beautiful home filled with beautiful things. One evening, a simple traveler passed through the town and was invited to share a meal with the merchant. "You must be very happy," the traveler said, looking around at the fine surroundings. "You have achieved so much." The merchant was quiet for a moment. "I should be happy. I know I should. But if I am honest, I am not." "Tell me more," the traveler said. "When I was young and had nothing, I was certain that wealth would bring happiness. So I worked, and I became wealthy. But happiness did not come. I thought perhaps I needed more. So I worked harder, and I gained more. Still, no happiness. And now? Now I have more than I ever imagined. And I feel emptier than I did when I started. There is a hunger in me that nothing seems to fill. I have spent my whole life feeding it, and it only grows larger." The traveler nodded slowly. "You have discovered something important, even if it does not feel that way. You have discovered that the hunger cannot be fed from the outside." "Then how can it be fed?" the merchant asked. "It cannot be fed at all," the traveler said. "It can only be seen through. The hunger is not real in the way you think it is. It is a habit of mind, a pattern that keeps spinning. When you stop trying to fill it and simply observe it, something begins to shift." "That sounds very difficult." "It is simpler than you might think," the traveler said. "But it requires a willingness to stop running, to sit still, to let the wanting be there without acting on it, and to notice that you are still alive, still whole, even when the wanting is not being fed." The Zen tradition speaks of this as the difference between seeking and finding. There is a story of a student who traveled far to meet a great teacher. "I have come seeking enlightenment," the student said. The teacher looked at him with kind eyes. "As long as you are seeking, you will not find. Seeking implies that what you want is somewhere else. But what you are looking for is already here. It has never been anywhere else. Then what should I do?" the student asked. "Stop seeking," the teacher said. "Rest in what is already present. The treasure is not hidden in some distant cave. It is in your own pocket. You have simply not thought to look there. But if I stop seeking, how will I find anything?" The teacher smiled. "You will not find anything. You will simply notice what has always been here. Finding implies effort, acquisition, adding something new. But your true nature is not something to be found. It is what remains when seeking stops." The student was confused. This was not what he had expected. "Sit with me," the teacher said. "Do not try to achieve anything. Do not try to get anywhere. Just sit and let everything be as it is." They sat together in silence. And in that silence, something the student had been chasing all his life began, very gently, to reveal itself. There is a teaching in the Buddhist tradition about the nature of desire. It says that when we truly examine our wanting, we find that it is not really about the object we desire. It is about the feeling we imagine we will have when we get the object. We want the new possession not for itself, but for the sense of satisfaction we imagine it will bring. We want the achievement not for itself, but for the feeling of worthiness we hope will follow. We want the relationship not just for the other person, but for the sense of completeness we believe they will provide. And here is the tender truth. The feelings we are seeking are not actually contained in the objects. The satisfaction, the worthiness, the completeness, these are states of our own being. They do not come from outside. They arise from within. This is why the satisfaction of getting what we want is always temporary. The object cannot deliver what we are really seeking. Only we can. Let us explore one more story. There was a person who loved to travel. Every year, they would choose a new destination, plan the trip carefully, and count the days until departure. The anticipation was delicious. Looking at photographs, reading about the places they would visit, imagining the experiences that awaited. But a strange thing happened, again and again. When they finally arrived at the destination, something was different. The places were beautiful, yes, but the person found themselves already thinking about the next trip, already planning, already wanting what came next. One year, this person traveled to a place of great natural beauty. Mountains and forests and clear streams. They had dreamed of this place for years. On the first evening, as the sun was setting over the mountains, they found themselves restless, looking at their phone, thinking about other places they wanted to visit someday. The magnificent sunset was happening, and they were barely present to it. A fellow traveler noticed this and sat down beside them. "Beautiful, is it not?" the fellow traveler said, gesturing toward the mountains. "Yes," the person said, though their voice was distracted. "You seem far away." The person sighed. "I have noticed something about myself. I am always happier planning trips than taking them. The anticipation is wonderful. But when I arrive, something is missing." "What do you think is missing?" "I do not know. It is as though the place can never quite match what I imagined. Or as though I cannot quite settle into being here." The fellow traveler nodded. "Perhaps what is missing is you." "What do you mean?" "When you are planning, your mind is filled with images of the future. That is pleasant because you are in control. You can make the future whatever you want it to be. But when you arrive, you are no longer in the future. You are in the present. And the present is not controllable. It is what it is. So I am always escaping the present," the person said, slowly. "Perhaps. The mind can become addicted to anticipation. It can find the present moment dull by comparison, because the present does not offer the same excitement as imagining what might be. But here is the secret. The present moment is where life actually happens. The future never arrives. It is always just out of reach. If we spend our lives in anticipation, we miss the only moment that is real." The person was quiet, taking this in. The sunset was still there, painting the sky in colors that would never return in quite this way. "How do I learn to be here?" the person asked. "You are asking how to do something very simple," the fellow traveler said. "Just be here. That is all. Notice when your mind has wandered into the future and gently bring it back. The mountains are not asking anything of you. The sunset is not waiting for you to be ready. They are simply here, offering themselves. Your only task is to receive them." The person sat quietly, allowing the words to sink in. The colors in the sky were deepening now, reds turning to purples, the first stars beginning to appear. "It is strange," the person said after a while. "When I stop trying to get something from this moment, it becomes so much more beautiful." "Yes," the fellow traveler said. "That is always the way. When we stop trying to take, we can finally receive." There is a story from the ancient traditions about a seeker who traveled to a mountain hermitage to ask a recluse about the nature of contentment. The seeker arrived exhausted from the long climb. The recluse welcomed them in and offered tea. "Please," the seeker said, "tell me the secret of contentment. I have spent my whole life wanting things, wanting success, wanting love, wanting respect, and even when I get what I want, the contentment never lasts. How do I find peace that does not fade?" The recluse poured the tea slowly, filling the seeker's cup, then kept pouring. The tea overflowed the cup, spilling onto the table, dripping onto the floor. "Stop," the seeker said. "The cup is full. It cannot hold any more." The recluse set down the teapot and smiled. "You are like this cup. You come here already full of wanting, full of ideas about what contentment should look like, full of the habit of reaching. How can I pour anything new into a cup that is already overflowing? What should I do? The seeker asked. Empty the cup, the recluse said. Let go of what you think you know. Let go of what you think you need. Sit here, in this moment, wanting nothing. Just for a little while. See what remains when the wanting stops. The seeker tried. It was not easy. The mind kept reaching forward, planning, wanting. But in small moments, gaps appeared. Brief spaces where the wanting fell silent. And in those gaps, something unexpected arose. A quiet sense of fullness. A contentment that did not depend on getting anything at all. I see, the seeker whispered. The contentment was here all along. The wanting was covering it up. Yes, the recluse said. You were so busy reaching that you could not feel what was already in your hands. The Buddha offered a teaching that cuts to the heart of this matter. He said, do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future, concentrate the mind on the present moment. This is not a rejection of memory or planning. Both have their place. It is an invitation to recognize where life actually is. Life is not in our memories, though memories can be sweet. Life is not in our plans, though plans can be useful. Life is here, now, in this breath, in this body, in this moment. When wanting pulls us out of the present, we leave life behind. We trade the richness of what is for the thinness of what might be. We sacrifice the only moment we have for an imagined moment that has not yet come. This does not mean we should never plan or never reach for anything. Planning has its place. Aspiration has its place. But they are tools, not masters. They serve life. Life does not serve them. The wise person moves through the world with open hands. They can hold things without gripping them. They can reach for things without being possessed by the reaching. They can want without being the wanting. This is a subtle but profound shift. It is the difference between being driven and being alive. There is a quality that begins to emerge when we are less identified with wanting. The teachers sometimes call it contentment, but this word can be misunderstood. It does not mean settling for less or giving up on what matters. It means finding a fullness that does not depend on circumstances. A person who has touched this contentment can still work toward goals. They can still enjoy pleasures and appreciate beauty. They can still participate fully in life. But there is a ground beneath it all that does not change. A peace that remains whether wants are satisfied or not. This is what the great teachers pointed toward when they spoke of liberation. Not an escape from life, but a freedom within it. Not the ending of desire, but the ending of slavery to desire. The wanting self says, I will be happy when I get what I want. The free self says, I am already happy. Let me see what this moment offers. Both can move through the same world, take the same actions, pursue the same goals. But one is at peace and one is not. One is present to life as it is, and one is always somewhere else. As we have learned, the wanting self is a powerful identification. It can take over so completely that we forget we are anything else. We become the one who is always reaching, always hungry, always on the way to somewhere else. But there is something in us that is not the wanting self. There is an awareness that can observe the wanting without being lost in it. There is a presence that remains, even when the cravings fall silent. This presence is not against wanting. It does not judge or condemn. It simply sees clearly. And in that clear seeing, the grip of wanting naturally loosens. We can still move toward what matters. We can still have preferences and goals, but we are no longer possessed by them. We are no longer convinced that happiness lies just around the corner, always out of reach. Happiness, it turns out, is not around the corner. It is here, in this moment, available whenever we stop chasing it and simply allow ourselves to be. Let us pause here for a moment. Notice if there is any wanting present right now. Perhaps a wanting for the next thing. Perhaps a wanting to feel different than you feel. Just notice it without judgment. And notice also the awareness that sees the wanting. Rest there. And when you are ready, we will continue together. There is a gesture the heart makes when something is unwanted. A tightening, a pulling back, a silent or sometimes not so silent no. We know this gesture intimately. We have felt it when someone says something that stings. We have felt it when we look in the mirror and do not like what we see. We have felt it when fear grips us, when anger flares, when shame whispers its cruel assessments. If wanting is the hand that reaches, this is the hand that pushes away. And it shapes us just as powerfully, perhaps even more so. Because while wanting pulls us toward imagined futures, this force often traps us in painful pasts, in stories of hurt and wrong, in identities built on what we reject and resist. This pushing away takes many forms. It can appear as fear, as anger, as judgment, as shame. It can be loud and explosive, or quiet and persistent. It can be directed outward at others, or inward at ourselves. What all forms of aversion share is a fundamental stance of no. No to what is happening. No to how things are. No to this person, this situation, this feeling, this moment. And like wanting, aversion creates a strong sense of self. When we are caught in fear, there is a frightened one at the center of experience. When we are caught in anger, there is an angry one. When we are caught in shame, there is a shameful one. This self feels very solid, very real. It can take over so completely that we forget we are anything else. The whole world contracts around the aversion, and we become it. The Buddha spoke of aversion as one of the three poisons, alongside craving and ignorance. He saw it as a fundamental cause of suffering, not because negative feelings are wrong, but because of what happens when we become identified with them. When we are identified with aversion, we lose our freedom. We become reactive instead of responsive. We see the world through a lens of threat and judgment. We contract into a small, defended self that is always at war with something. And here is the painful irony. The very stance that we hope will protect us actually creates more suffering. We push away what we fear, and the fear grows stronger. We fight against what we hate, and the hate consumes us. We try to escape what shames us, and the shame follows wherever we go. The way out is not through more pushing, more fighting, more escaping. It is through something much gentler and much more courageous. Sometimes the most painful lessons come wrapped in good intentions. There was a person who prided themselves on being helpful. Whenever someone they loved was struggling, They would step in with advice, with solutions, with plans for how to make things better. This felt like love to them. This felt like caring. One day, someone very close to them was going through a difficult time. There had been a loss, and grief was moving through in its own unpredictable way. Sometimes there were tears. Sometimes there was confusion. Sometimes there was just a heavy silence. The helpful person found this hard to witness. They wanted to fix it. They wanted to make the pain go away. "Have you thought about talking to someone?" they suggested. "A professional, I mean. Someone who can help you process this." "I am not ready for that," the grieving one said quietly. "Well, what about joining a group? I have heard there are groups for people going through what you are going through. It might help to know you are not alone. I just need some time." "But time is passing, and you do not seem to be getting better. I am worried about you. I think you need to take some action." The grieving one looked up, and there was something in their eyes that the helpful person had not expected. Not gratitude, not appreciation, something closer to hurt. "I do not need you to fix me," they said. "I need you to just be with me. Can you do that? Can you just sit here without trying to make it different?" The words landed like a stone in the helpful person's chest. They wanted to defend themselves, to explain that they were only trying to help. But something stopped them. Some part of them knew that the grieving one was right. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then the helpful person said, quietly, "I am sorry. I did not mean to make you feel like a problem to be solved. I know you meant well," the grieving one said. "But meaning well is not the same as being present. Sometimes the most loving thing is to just let someone feel what they feel." After that conversation, the helpful person went home. And that is when the aversive self took over. The thoughts began almost immediately. How could I be so insensitive? I know better than this. I talk about presence. I value listening. And then when it mattered most, I did exactly what I know not to do. The feeling in the chest was heavy, sharp, constricting, a kind of stabbing ache that seemed to say, "You are not who you thought you were. You are not as kind as you believed. Something is wrong with you." This is what the teachers call the collapse into bad personhood. We make a mistake, and instead of simply acknowledging it and learning from it, we turn it into an identity. We become the bad one, the failure, the one who always gets it wrong. The helpful person lay awake that night, replaying the conversation again and again. Each replay made it worse. Each replay confirmed the judgment. I am a bad friend. I am a bad person. How could I? There is something important to understand about this kind of self-judgment. It feels like accountability. It feels like taking responsibility. It feels like the appropriate response to having caused harm. But it is not actually helpful. It does not repair the relationship. It does not make us more likely to do better next time. It simply traps us in a painful loop of self-rejection. The Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki once said, "The most important thing is to find out what is the most important thing. When we have caused harm, what is the most important thing? Is it to punish ourselves? Is it to prove how bad we feel? Or is it to acknowledge what happened, to learn from it, and to return to presence so that we can respond more skillfully in the future?" The aversive self wants to punish. It believes that suffering is the appropriate payment for wrongdoing. But suffering does not pay the debt. It only creates more suffering, rippling outward to touch everyone around us. The helpful person spent several days caught in self-judgment. They avoided the grieving one, too ashamed to face them. They withdrew from other relationships too, feeling unworthy of connection. Then they remembered something a teacher had once said: when you are suffering, ask yourself, who do you think you are right now? What identity have you collapsed into? The helpful person sat quietly and asked this question: who do I think I am right now? The answer came immediately: I am someone who hurts people. I am someone who cannot be trusted. I am someone who fails at the things that matter most. And then a gentler question arose: is this who I really am? Is this the whole truth? Something softened. Not the feeling of regret that remained, but the harsh judgment began to loosen its grip. The helpful person began to see that they had made a mistake, yes. They had been unskillful, yes. But they were not a bad person. They were a person who had acted from habit, from anxiety, from a misguided wish to help. This is an important distinction. There is a difference between acknowledging a mistake and turning it into an identity. One leads to growth. The other leads to paralysis. The aversive self has two main directions it can turn. It can turn outward in anger and judgment toward others, or it can turn inward in anger and judgment toward ourselves. When it turns outward, we see a world full of threats and enemies. People become problems to be solved or obstacles to be overcome. We find ourselves in constant conflict, defending our position, attacking others who we perceive as wrong. When it turns inward, we become our own worst enemy. We criticize ourselves relentlessly. We hold ourselves to impossible standards. We replay our failures and dismiss our successes. We live under a cloud of shame that colors everything. Both directions cause suffering. Both directions create a tight, contracted sense of self. And both directions obscure our true nature, which is not fundamentally angry or fundamentally ashamed. Fear is perhaps the most primal form of aversion. It is the pushing away of what might harm us, the contraction against threat. In its original form, fear was a gift. It kept our ancestors alive. It alerted them to danger, prepared their bodies to fight or flee, ensured the survival of the species. But in modern life, fear often runs far beyond its usefulness. We fear not just physical threats but social ones. We fear rejection, failure, embarrassment, loss of status. We fear what others think of us. We fear our own inadequacy. We fear that we are not enough and never will be. And this fear, when it becomes our center of gravity, shapes our entire experience of life. We hold back from taking risks. We stay in situations that no longer serve us. We live small lives, bounded by the walls of what we are afraid might happen. A person once spoke to a teacher about this kind of fear. "I have so many things I want to do," they said. "But I am afraid. Afraid of failing. Afraid of looking foolish. Afraid that I am not talented enough or smart enough or strong enough. The fear stops me before I even begin." "Tell me about this fear," the teacher said. "Where do you feel it in your body?" "In my chest and my stomach. A kind of tightness, a clenching. And when the fear is strong, What do you believe about yourself? That I am small. That I cannot handle what might happen. That something terrible will occur if I step forward. These beliefs, the teacher said, are they true? They feel true when I am afraid. Yes, feelings are convincing. But feelings are not facts. You have survived everything that has happened to you so far. You have handled difficulties you never thought you could handle. You are stronger than the fear tells you. But what if I fail? You will fail, the teacher said simply. Everyone fails. Failure is how we learn. The question is not whether you will fail, but whether you will let the fear of failure stop you from living. The person was quiet, taking this in. The fear will probably not go away, the teacher continued. But you do not have to wait for fearlessness to act. You can feel the fear and move forward anyway. You can be afraid and still be brave. In fact, that is the only kind of bravery there is. Consider someone who struggled with anger. It had been with them since childhood, this quick flame that could ignite at the smallest provocation. Over the years, it had cost them relationships, opportunities, peace of mind. I am an angry person, they said to a teacher one day. That is just who I am. I have tried to change, but the anger always returns. The teacher listened carefully. Tell me about the last time you were angry. Someone cut in front of me in a line. I had been waiting patiently, and they just walked right past as if I did not exist. I could feel the heat rising in my chest. I wanted to say something harsh, to put them in their place. And what did you do? I said something I am not proud of. And then I felt terrible for the rest of the day. So you noticed the anger arise, the teacher said. You noticed the heat in your chest. You noticed the urge to speak harshly. Tell me, who noticed all of this? The person paused. I did, I suppose. And this one who noticed, were they angry? What do you mean? The one who observed the anger arising, the one who felt the heat, the one who noticed the urge, were they identical with the anger? Or were they watching the anger? The person thought about this for a long time. I think I was watching it. Even while it was happening, some part of me was watching. That part, the teacher said, is not an angry person. That part is awareness itself. And awareness has no fixed nature. It can hold anger, but it is not anger. It can hold peace, but it is not peace. It is the space in which all experiences arise and pass away. But the anger feels so much like me, the person said. Yes, it does. That is the nature of identification. When we are caught in an emotion, it feels like our entire self. But this is an illusion. The emotion is a visitor. You are the home it visits. And no visitor, no matter how loud or demanding, can change the nature of the home. So what do I do when the anger comes? You welcome it, strange as that may sound. You say, anger is here. You feel it in your body. You let it be, without feeding it with more thoughts, without pushing it away. And you remember that you are the home, not the visitor. In time, the visitor will leave. They always do. There is a particular suffering that comes when we are both the one who has been hurt and the one who has caused hurt. When we are caught between anger at another and shame at ourselves. When we cannot find solid ground because every direction seems to offer only pain. A person came to a teacher in exactly this state. "I do not know who to be angry at," they said. "Someone betrayed me, and I am furious. But I also see that I played a part in what happened, and I am ashamed. I go back and forth between blaming them and blaming myself. There is no peace anywhere. You are looking for someone to be the villain," the teacher observed. "You believe that if you can identify who is truly at fault, you will find rest." Yes, exactly. But what if there is no villain? What if there are only human beings acting from their conditioning, doing their best with what they understood at the time? "That feels like letting everyone off the hook," the person said. "Including myself. Does it? Or does it simply allow you to see clearly, without the distortion of blame? You can still recognize that harm was done. You can still take steps to protect yourself from future harm. You can still make amends for your own part. But you do all of this without the added suffering of needing someone to be bad. How do I do that? How do I let go of the need to blame?" "You notice it," the teacher said. "Each time the blaming mind arises, you recognize it. Blaming again. And you gently return to what is actually happening in this moment. The blaming is about the past or the future. But your life is here, now. When you come back to the present, the blaming loses its grip." The Buddha offered a famous teaching about anger. He said, "Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned." This image is worth sitting with. We think that our anger hurts the one we are angry at. But often, they do not even know we are angry. They go about their lives, unaffected, while we burn our own hands holding the coal. The same is true of self-judgment. We think that punishing ourselves somehow balances the scales, somehow makes up for what we have done. But the scales do not care about our suffering. Only we suffer. Only we burn. Letting go of the coal is not the same as saying what happened was okay. It is simply recognizing that holding on to it hurts only us. We can put it down. We can tend to our burned hands. We can learn from what happened without continuing to wound ourselves. There is a practice that many teachers offer for working with the aversive self. It is not a technique to make difficult feelings go away. It is a way of being with them that allows them to move through naturally. The practice begins with recognition. We notice that we are caught. We notice the contraction in the body, the heaviness in the heart, the stories in the mind. We simply acknowledge something is here. Some form of aversion has arisen. Then we name it gently. This is suffering. This is pain. Not my pain, but the pain. Not personal failure, but the universal experience of a human heart in distress. Then we ask, how do I want to relate to this? Not how do I get rid of it, but how do I meet it? What would it be like to meet this pain with kindness instead of more aversion? This is the crucial turn. Usually, when we feel something painful, we add aversion to it. We judge ourselves for feeling it. We fight against it. We try to escape. And all of this adds more suffering to the original pain. But what if we could meet the pain with gentleness? What if we could hold our own suffering the way we would hold a dear friend who is hurting? We come back now to the helpful person from our earlier story. The helpful person, after sitting with the question of identity, began to feel something transform. The harsh self-judgment was still there, but it was no longer the whole of their experience. There was also an awareness watching the judgment, and that awareness was not judging. They placed a hand on their heart, a simple gesture of kindness. "This is hard," they said quietly to themselves. "I made a mistake, and it hurts. I hurt someone I love, and that is painful to acknowledge." Something in the chest began to soften. Not the regret itself, but the layer of harshness around it. "I really wanted to help," they continued. "I really wanted to ease their pain." That wanting came from love, even if the action that followed was unskillful. More softening. The painful feeling was still there, but it was being held now, not fought against. "I am still learning," they said. "I am still growing." Making mistakes is part of being human. It does not mean I am a bad person. It means I am a person. And then the deepest question arose again, but this time with gentleness. Is this mistake who I really am? And the answer came, not as words, but as a felt sense. No, this is something that happened. It is not who I am. The helpful person sat for a while longer in this new spaciousness. The pain was still there, but it was no longer suffocating. There was room around it. There was air. There was even, strangely, a kind of tenderness. Later that day, they reached out to the grieving one. Not to defend themselves, not to explain, but simply to acknowledge. "I am sorry," they said. "You were right. I was trying to fix instead of being present. I see that now. Thank you," the grieving one said. "That means a lot." And something began to heal. Shame deserves special attention because it is perhaps the most painful form of aversion we can experience. Anger says, "Something out there is wrong." Fear says, "Something out there is dangerous." But shame says, "Something in here is wrong. I am the problem. I am defective." This makes shame particularly difficult to work with. We can fight against external threats. We can flee from external dangers. But how do we escape ourselves? The answer, paradoxically, is that we stop trying to escape. We turn toward the shame instead of away from it. We bring to it the same kindness we would bring to a frightened child. A person who had carried shame for many years once described their healing this way. "For so long, I believed the shame. I believed that there was something fundamentally wrong with me, something that could never be fixed. I spent my life trying to hide it, trying to prove that I was okay, trying to be perfect so that no one would see the defect. But the hiding never worked. The shame just grew stronger in the darkness. It fed on secrecy and silence. What changed was when I finally shared it with someone I trusted. I said out loud the things I had been most ashamed of. And instead of rejection, I received compassion. Instead of disgust, I received understanding. In that moment, something shifted. The shame did not disappear entirely, but it lost its power. It was no longer a secret. It was just a part of my story, a part that could be held with kindness instead of hidden in fear. This is often how shame heals. Not through more hiding, more perfection, more proving, but through being seen, being known, being accepted anyway. Through discovering that we are not alone in our struggles, that everyone carries wounds, that our imperfections are what make us human. The aversive self is not our enemy. It is a part of us that is trying to protect us, even when its methods cause more harm than good. When we can see it with compassion, when we can understand its origins and its intentions, we can begin to work with it instead of against it. This does not mean we let harmful behaviors continue. It does not mean we excuse cruelty or injustice in ourselves or others. It means we respond from clarity rather than reactivity. We address what needs to be addressed without adding unnecessary suffering. A Zen saying puts it simply, no blame. This does not mean no accountability. It means no extra suffering piled on top of what is already painful. It means meeting each moment, even the difficult ones, with as much presence and kindness as we can muster. As we have explored, the aversive self takes many forms: fear, anger, judgment, shame. All of these create a contracted sense of identity, a small self that is always at war with something. But beneath all of these, there is an awareness that is not at war. There is a presence that can hold even the most difficult emotions without being destroyed by them. There is a peace that does not depend on circumstances being pleasant. This is what we are invited to discover, not by fighting the aversive self, but by meeting it with kindness, not by trying to escape our difficult feelings, but by learning to be the sky that holds all weather. Let us pause here for a moment. If there is any aversion present in you right now, any tension or judgment or resistance, simply notice it. And remember that you are the awareness that notices, not the aversion itself. When you are ready, we will continue together. So here we are. We have walked through many rooms together. We have looked at how we build a sense of self from body and thought and role. We have felt the pull of wanting and the push of aversion. We have seen how these forces create a tight, small sense of who we are. And perhaps a question has been growing quietly in the background. What do we do with all of this? How do we actually find freedom, not just understand it? This is what we explore now. Not more concepts, but a way of being with our experience that opens the door to something larger. There is an image that may be helpful here. Imagine the ocean. Vast, deep, stretching beyond what the eye can see. On the surface, there are waves. Some are small ripples. Some are large swells. Sometimes the surface is calm. Sometimes there are storms. Now, most of us live as if we are the waves. When a wave of anger arises, we become an angry person. When a wave of fear passes through, we become someone who is afraid. When sadness comes, we are sad. When joy comes, we are happy. We rise and fall with the waves. We are tossed about by whatever is moving on the surface. But here is the thing. We are not only the waves. We are also the ocean. The ocean does not stop being the ocean when a storm passes through. It does not become something else when the waves are high. It simply holds whatever is happening on the surface, and in its depths, it remains still. This is not just a nice idea. It points to something we can actually experience. There is a stillness in us that is not disturbed by the movements of thought and emotion. There is a depth that remains, even when the surface is wild. The question is, how do we find this depth? How do we stop being tossed by every wave and learn to rest in what we truly are? The answer is simpler than we might expect. We do not find the ocean by rejecting the waves. We find it by going into the waves completely. This sounds strange at first. If the waves are the problem, why would we go deeper into them? Because the waves are not actually the problem. The problem is that we stay on the surface, caught in the movement, identified with the rising and falling. When we go deeper, we discover that the wave is made of ocean. There is no separation. The very substance of the wave is water, and the water is the ocean. In the same way, when we go deeply into our experience, we find that it is made of awareness. The anger, the fear, the sadness, all of it arises in awareness and is made of awareness. When we stop fighting the experience and simply feel it fully, we touch the awareness itself. This does not mean the feelings disappear. The wave does not stop being a wave when we recognize it as ocean. But something shifts in how we hold it. There is more space, more room to breathe. We are no longer trapped. A teacher once described this to a student who was struggling with difficult emotions. When the feelings come, the student said, "They overwhelm me. I do not know how to handle them. I try to push them away, but they only grow stronger." "What if you stop pushing?" the teacher asked. "Then I am afraid they would swallow me whole." Has that ever actually happened? Have you ever been permanently swallowed by a feeling? The student thought about this. No. The feelings always pass eventually. But while they are here, it feels like they will last forever. This is important to notice, the teacher said. The fear of the feeling is often worse than the feeling itself. We add so much resistance, so much struggle, that the original pain becomes enormous. So what should I do instead? When a difficult feeling arises, stop. Just stop. Do not run toward it or away from it. Simply let it be here. Feel it in your body. Notice where it lives, what it feels like, how it moves. And then, gently go into it. Not with force, but with curiosity, with kindness. Go into it? Yes. Most of us only touch the surface of our feelings. We react to the first layer and then pull back. But feelings have depth, just like you do. When you are willing to go deeper, you find that something opens. The tight knot begins to loosen. There is space inside the pain that you did not know was there. A person who had practiced this for many years described the experience. "I used to run from sadness," they said. "Whenever it would come, I would distract myself, keep busy, push it away. I was afraid that if I let myself feel it, I would drown. Then I learned to do something different. When sadness came, I would sit down, I would close my eyes, and I would let myself feel it fully. Not thinking about it, not analyzing it, just feeling it. At first, it was intense. The heaviness in my chest, the ache behind my eyes, the sense of loss. I wanted to pull away, but I stayed. And then something unexpected happened. The sadness was still there, but there was space around it. I was holding the sadness rather than being swallowed by it. And in that holding, there was a kind of tenderness, a softness. It was painful, but it was also somehow beautiful. I realized that the sadness was not my enemy. It was a part of life moving through me. And by letting it move, by not blocking it, something healed. Not all at once, but gradually. The sadness became lighter. It came and went more freely. It no longer controlled me. This is the secret that the ancient teachers pointed toward. We do not find peace by escaping our experience. We find it by meeting our experience fully, with presence and kindness. The Buddha sat beneath a tree on the night of his awakening. Many things arose in his mind: fear, desire, doubt, memories of the past, worries about the future. Instead of fighting these visitors, he simply acknowledged them. He touched the earth and remained present. And in that presence, in that willingness to meet whatever arose, something opened. He saw through the illusion of the separate self. He recognized the vast awareness that had been there all along, obscured by identification with the passing show. This is available to each of us, not as a dramatic event, necessarily, but as a gradual opening. Each time we meet our experience with presence rather than resistance, we are practicing awakening. Each time we feel a difficult emotion fully, without running, we are discovering the ocean beneath the waves. There is a simple way to begin this. It starts with recognition. When something difficult arises, the first step is simply to notice. Oh, something is happening here. There is tightness in my chest. There is heat in my face. There are thoughts spinning. Something is here. This sounds obvious, but most of the time, we skip right past it. We react before we even know what we are reacting to. We are already yelling, already withdrawing, already planning our escape before we have paused to see what is actually present. So the first step is just to stop, to pause, to recognize that something is arising. The second step is to name it gently, not with clinical labels, but with kindness. This is hard. This hurts. This is suffering. There is something powerful in naming our experience this way. It creates a small distance, a bit of breathing room. We are no longer completely swallowed by the feeling. We are the one who can observe and name it. And then comes the most important step. We ask ourselves, how do I want to meet this? Usually, we meet difficulty with more difficulty. We add resistance to pain. We add judgment to fear. We pile suffering on top of suffering. But we have a choice. We can meet the pain with kindness instead. We can hold our own suffering the way we might hold a child who is hurting. This is not weakness. It is not self-indulgence. It is the beginning of freedom. A woman shared her experience of learning this. I had always been hard on myself, she said. Whenever I made a mistake, I would criticize myself harshly. I thought this was how you improved, by being strict with yourself. But it never worked. The criticism just made me feel worse, which made me more likely to make mistakes, which gave me more to criticize. It was a cycle that never ended. Then someone suggested I try something different. When the criticism came, instead of believing it, I should notice it. And then I should ask, would I speak to a friend this way? Would I say these things to someone I loved? The answer was always no. I would never be so cruel to someone else. Why was I being so cruel to myself? So I began to experiment. When I noticed the critical voice, I would pause, and I would try to speak to myself the way I would speak to a dear friend. Gently, with understanding, with compassion. It felt strange at first, almost fake. But over time, something changed. The criticism did not disappear, but it lost its power. I could hear it without believing it. And in the space that opened, there was room for kindness, There is something important to understand here. This is not about being passive or allowing harmful things to continue. It is not about suppressing our natural responses or pretending that everything is fine. When action is needed, we act. When boundaries need to be set, we set them. When something is wrong, we address it. But we can do all of this from presence rather than from reactivity. We can respond to life from the depth of who we are rather than being tossed about on the surface. A parent once asked a teacher about this. "My child does things that make me angry," the parent said. "Are you saying I should not feel the anger?" "Not at all," the teacher said. "The anger is natural. It arises to protect, to set limits, to communicate that something is not okay. The question is not whether you feel it, but how you relate to it." "What do you mean?" "When anger arises, you can be consumed by it. You can become anger, lose yourself in it, say and do things you later regret. Or you can feel the anger fully while remaining present. You can let it inform you without letting it control you. From that place, you can respond to your child clearly and firmly, without causing harm." "That sounds difficult." "It takes practice," the teacher agreed. "But it is possible, and it changes everything. Your child feels the difference between a parent who is out of control and a parent who is present and clear. One creates fear, the other creates safety." There is an old poem that speaks to this way of being. It says something like this: "Go in and in. Be the space between two cells, the vast silence in which spirit dwells. Go in, and turn away from nothing that you find." This is the invitation. To go deeply into our experience, whatever it is. To find the space that exists within everything. And to turn away from nothing. We are so used to turning away. From pain. From fear. From parts of ourselves we do not like. We spend enormous energy avoiding, suppressing, escaping. But everything we turn away from remains with us, hidden in the shadows. It shapes us from below, influences us in ways we do not see. Only when we turn toward it, when we bring it into the light of awareness, can it begin to transform. A man who had carried anger for many years finally decided to face it. "I was angry at my father," he said. "He had hurt me when I was young, and I had carried that anger my whole life. It colored everything. My relationships, my work, my sense of myself. For years, I thought I was dealing with it by pushing it down. I told myself I had moved on, that the past was the past. But the anger was still there, running things from the basement. Finally, I decided to really look at it. I sat down, alone, and I let myself feel the full weight of it. The rage, the sense of injustice, the grief underneath the anger, which I had never allowed myself to feel. It was not pleasant, but as I stayed with it, something began to shift. I saw that my father had been a hurt person himself. I saw that he had done the best he could with what he had. This did not excuse what he did, but it allowed me to see him more fully. And beneath the anger, I found sadness. And beneath the sadness, I found love. The anger had been protecting me from feeling how much I had wanted his love and how painful it was not to receive it. When I let myself feel that, something released. The anger did not disappear entirely, but it lost its grip. I was no longer controlled by it. I was free to feel it when it arose, and also free to let it go. This is what happens when we are willing to go all the way into our experience. We discover that our feelings have layers. We discover that beneath the surface emotions, there are often deeper ones. And beneath those, there is often something tender and true. The anger that seems so hard may be covering fear. The fear may be covering grief. The grief may be covering love. When we have the courage to keep going, to keep feeling, we eventually arrive at something that is not a problem at all. We arrive at the aliveness of being human. We arrive at the ocean itself. There is another image worth holding here. We each have a name we call ourselves. The familiar name of the ego, the identity we have constructed. But the teachers say we have other names too. Names we have forgotten. Names that point to who we really are. One teacher put it this way: can you feel, deep inside your chest, the one who has existed forever? The one who has made 1,000 journeys? That one is you. That one is the real you. We forget this. We get so caught up in the small self, with its worries and wants and fears, that we lose touch with the vastness we contain. But it is always here, always available, waiting patiently for us to remember. Sometimes the remembering happens in unexpected moments. A man was walking by a river, lost in thought, worrying about problems at work. The thoughts were spinning, each one leading to another, an endless chain of concerns. Then a bird called out, a simple sound cutting through the noise. And for a moment, the thinking stopped. There was just the sound of the bird, the movement of the water, the feel of the air on his skin. There was just this moment, alive and present. In that gap, something else became apparent. There was awareness here, behind the thoughts. An awareness that had been here all along, unnoticed, while the mind spun its stories. The moment passed. The thoughts returned. But something had been seen that could not be unseen. There was more to him than the worried thinker. There was something still and clear, watching the whole show. He did not try to hold on to the experience. He had learned that grasping for such moments only pushes them away. But he carried with him the knowledge that it was possible. That beneath the surface chatter, there was depth. There was silence. There was peace. This is how it often works. We catch glimpses. We touch something real. And then we return to the familiar patterns of thinking and reacting. Some people get discouraged by this. They think they have failed, that they have lost something precious. But nothing is lost. The ocean does not disappear when clouds cover the sky. Our true nature does not go anywhere when we forget it. It simply waits, patient and unchanging, for the next moment of remembering. A teacher was asked, "How do I stay in awareness all the time?" The teacher laughed gently. "You do not stay in awareness. You return to awareness. Again and again. The returning is the practice. The forgetting is not failure. It is simply what happens. The beauty is in the coming back." "But I want to be free all the time," the student said. "Freedom is not a state you achieve and keep forever," the teacher said. "Freedom is available in this moment, and this one, and this one. Each moment you remember, you are free. Each moment you forget, you have another opportunity to remember. This is the rhythm of the path. Do not fight it. Dance with it. An old woman was asked near the end of her life what she had learned. When I was young, she said, I thought I was my body. When the body felt good, I felt good. When it felt bad, I felt bad. I was at the mercy of every ache and pleasure. Then I thought I was my accomplishments. I worked so hard to prove myself, to build something that would last. And some of those things were good. But I was never satisfied. There was always more to do. Then I thought I was my roles. Mother, wife, worker, friend. I poured myself into these, and they gave me meaning. But when the roles changed, when children grew up, and work ended, and friends passed away, I did not know who I was. Finally, I stopped looking for myself in all these places. I stopped asking what I had done or what I had become. I simply sat still and asked, what remains when everything else is gone? And something answered, not in words, just a quiet knowing, a sense of presence that has been here all along, beneath all the noise. That presence is who I am. It was never born and it will never die. Everything else comes and goes. That remains. This is what we have been exploring together. Not a set of ideas to believe, but a truth to discover for ourselves. We are not the tight, small self we have taken ourselves to be. We are something vast, something that contains all of our experience but is not limited to any of it. The Buddha said it simply, you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that knows the thoughts. When we rest in that awareness, even for a moment, we taste freedom. We see that the waves were never a problem. We were just confused about what we are. There is a powerful reflection worth holding. When we discover who we really are, we do not leave the world behind. We do not float away into some abstract spiritual realm. We come back to this life, this body, this moment, with new eyes. The same tasks await us, the same relationships, the same challenges, but we meet them differently. We meet them from the depth of who we are, rather than from the surface of our reactions. And something beautiful happens. We stop fighting life. We stop needing it to be different. We begin to see that this moment, exactly as it is the only moment there is. And it is enough. A teacher once said, to be of the earth is to know the restlessness of being a seed, the darkness of being planted, the struggle toward the light, the pain of growth into the light, the joy of bursting and bearing fruit, the love of being food for someone, the scattering of your seeds, the turning of the seasons, and the mystery that holds it all. We are part of this great unfolding. We belong to life itself. We always have. The separation we feel, the sense that we are alone, cut off, struggling on our own, this is the illusion we have been examining throughout our time together. It is the illusion created by identification with a small self. When we see through this illusion, even a little, we find that we were never separate at all. We are connected to everything. We are expressions of the same life that moves through all things. A monk was once asked, what changed when he awakened? Nothing changed, he said, and everything changed. The trees are still trees. The sky is still sky. But I no longer see myself as separate from them. I am not looking at life. I am life, looking. Does this make you feel special? The questioner asked. The monk laughed. It makes me feel the opposite of special. It makes me feel ordinary in the most wonderful way. Everything is ordinary. Everything is miraculous. These are not different things. And so we come to a resting place, though not an ending. What we have shared together is not a destination. It is more like a door that has been pointed out. You can walk through it any time you choose. In fact, you already have, many times, whether you knew it or not. Every moment of unexpected peace. Every time the mind grew quiet without effort. Every glimpse of beauty that stopped you in your tracks. These were not accidents. They were rememberings. Small tastes of what you have always been. The path ahead is simple, even when it is not easy. When you forget, notice that you have forgotten. When you get caught, recognize that you are caught. And then, gently, without blame, return to presence. Return to this breath. Return to the awareness that has never left you. You do not need to be perfect at this. No one is. The forgetting is part of it. The returning is the practice. Thank you for walking this path with me. Thank you for your willingness to look within, to question what you have assumed, to open to something larger than the familiar stories of self. Whatever arises in your life from here, may you meet it with kindness. May you remember, again and again, the vastness you contain. And may you rest, whenever you need to, in the peace that was never lost. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Sleepy Monk.